Macmillan Audio presents The Ride by Kostya Kennedy. Read by Johnny Heller. Chapter 1. Echoes. What if the militiamen had not been waiting at the Lexington Green at dawn on that April day in 1775 to test and slow the British? What if they had not then been at Concord a few hours later, 220 strong, ready and resolute on the high ground? Those patriot soldiers arrived by the hundreds that morning, then by the thousands, armed and keen and strengthened in their numbers. They mustered on the damp, open fields and on the forest edges along the old Concord Road. Farmers and tradesmen, with their muskets and fowling pieces in hand. They turned back the redcoats and then fired on them in their retreat, routing them out of town and back off the land that the patriots knew now as their own. Villagers from the highlands and the low, ministers and deists and non-believers, men dressed in whatever clothes they had, their patched and varied breeches, their worn straight last boots, a hodgepodge of an earnest crew, transformed by necessity and determination into American soldiers, who that morning showed the will that would drive them in the weeks and months ahead, the will that would win the Revolutionary War. Suppose they had not come that morning after all. Suppose they had not been so timely in their arrival, not been so committed to their call. Suppose instead the seasoned British soldiers, in their fine cocked hats and under their general's command, had in their ransacking of Concord's Barrett farm found and taken the stores of gunpowder and ammunition they had come to seize. Imagine if the British had caught the Americans by surprise, as they'd intended. Imagine if, in Lexington, they had killed or captured Samuel Adams or John Hancock, delivering on the bounty that had been put on those men by the king. What would have happened to the path of the American Revolution then? If not for that first morning of battle, of impudent, plucky, stunning, and world-shifting patriot success, would the rebelling American army have continued to mobilize so confidently? Would it have stayed so unified in the face of defeat and death, have remained so emboldened to succeed? Would the army have fared so well, even in defeat in the Battle of Bunker Hill, 8 weeks later? Would the Revolution have unfolded so quickly as it did? Would we have July 4th, 1776 as our day of independence? Or how much longer might the British have held their grip? Into the 1780s, the 1790s, the 1800s, and beyond? And if they had held that longer grip, what might then have been the implications for the establishment and growth of the American democracy in the years and decades that followed? What would be the implications today? When we ask these things, when we consider the plausible alternatives to the chain of events that occurred on April 18th and April 19th, 1775, we are asking this: what might have happened? How might the much-documented and much deconstructed birth of our nation have unfolded, and with what repercussions, had not Paul Revere mounted his borrowed horse and set out to ride those critical miles, in those critical hours, across the simmering moonlit land, to rouse the countryside and deliver the news? What would have become of the Revolution, of its crucial early days? What would have become of the whole hard, taxing, extraordinary journey to independence, if not for Paul Revere and his midnight ride? Of all the Revolutionary War events that live on in collective memory, immortalized in art and prose, perhaps none conjures such a succinct image as Paul Revere galloping on his horse under cover of darkness, warning of the British threat. Perhaps no night was more critical to our fate. If the ride echoes in romance through the imperishable Henry Wadsworth Longfellow verse that for generations of Americans served as history, it remains resonant for its immediacy, its example of courage and enterprise and urgency. The story endures because of what it represents and what it was. Ordinary men meeting the moment of their lives. An engraver in Paul Revere, a tanner in William Dawes, a doctor in Samuel Prescott, and a network of some 40 riders.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?